Hi everyone, my name is Johnny Abbott and I'm the Debt Centre Manager for the Loughborough Debt Centre. Our vision for the last year had been to reach out to the poor and the vulnerable in the community, and we were looking for ways to do that. And although we tried our own things a little bit, nothing had really worked, or not in the way that we'd hoped anyway. So we, after a lot of prayer and a lot of pondering and discussing between the church officers, we decided we'd take a leap of faith and prayerfully dive into it. Although we were starting the debt centre and the food bank at the same time, we haven't been short of volunteers to help for either of those. And so again, that's been just God providing the people and the resources and giving people that heart to serve and have them be involved in a ministry.
I'm Vicky and I'm a befriender at our church. I decided to become a befriender because I'd heard about CAP and I'd heard just so many good stories about how they'd help people, but you're just kind of there to be whatever they need, really. It might just be inviting them round for a meal or taking them some shopping or just being there to have a chat or send them a text every now and then. It really kind of depends on the client, I think, as just to how involved you get and what they need.
Good afternoon, Bev speaking. Can I help you?
Hiya, I've been asked to speak to you by my psychiatrist about my debt problems.
Of course. Well, what I can do is take a few details, see if we have a service in the area where you live, and then, see what we can do to help. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
My name's Bev Goddard, and I work on the new enquiry team. I take calls from new clients calling in. I've been doing this now for 11 years and still love my job. It's just a fantastic thing to do, to be a part of people's lives, and I see it as a real privilege.
We have a Loughborough CAP centre, and the gentleman there would be able to see you. Now, he's booked up for a few weeks. He's obviously a busy centre, but he could see you on the 7th of May. They'll come out to see you at home. It's a gentleman called Johnny Abbott. Because he's coming to see a lady, he'll bring a lady befriender out with him.
Thank you.
See you at home, go through the finances, look at the best options to get the debts clear, and then we start to deal with the creditors on your behalf. So, it will take a lot of the pressure off you. You take care, and I hope that goes well for you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
My role, I think, compared to theirs is easy because they've got the face-to-face. Even though at the moment I know it's mostly over the telephone, that's really where the rubber hits the road because they're doing so much.
Vicky and I got to the flat, and we, as we always do, we have a pray before we go in to see any clients, and we were just praying together that God would open up an opportunity, and that His presence would be with us as we had that meeting. And so we knocked on the door, and she opened the door and welcomed us in.
I'm Rebecca. I'm 23 and I became debt-free in April. At 18, I had just suffered a second trimester miscarriage, and I received a letter while my partner at the time was at work, and it had final warning on, and I'd not received any letters. And I opened it and it was a rent arrear, and I was like, hold on a second, he's been telling me he's been paying all these, and then more and more letters came, and they were with my name, and I'd never seen these companies before. I'd not had anything from these companies, and I'd realised that my ex-partner was getting money out in my name, and then it got to council tax letters were coming through, and I was getting threatened to go court and people coming into my house, and I was really panicking. If my phone rang and I didn't recognise the number, I wouldn't answer it because I was just so rattled with fear. And when I did try and get help, it just felt like everyone was saying, you know, this is all your fault, this is all your fault. And CAP was the first place that I didn't feel that. It took me a couple of weeks to ring. I was really nervous and I felt really ashamed, actually, being in all this debt so young. You know, Johnny was lovely and he spoke to me about all the like logistical side of things and what would be happening, how CAP works, and Vicky got to know me a little bit, and you know, I didn't feel judged by these people.
So when I met Becca, you could definitely tell that she'd been through a lot in her life and been through some very difficult circumstances. She'd obviously got some health issues as well, to do with, you know, the things that she'd been through. So you could tell she was, you know, quite distressed from her situation. But at the same time, she was actually very, very open to help.
Rebecca was one of those 1 in a million where you go, have you got any paperwork put together? And she says, yes. I think I've got everything. I've gone through all my accounts and I've printed everything off for you. And she literally handed me this pile and was like, there you go. And I was like, wow, that never happens.
She's actually quite organised, so it was quite nice going into a situation where she actually had a lot of her paperwork all together, and she knew what all her debts were, and she was actually kind of in that way it was actually quite simple because she had everything that we needed and we could go through it all quite quickly within the visits.
It also meant that we had more opportunity to talk about church and talk about her story, and it became apparent that there was such a need for, I think, the love of Jesus to break through. And we knew that was what she needed. We talked about a church service and whether she'd be interested in coming to church or not. And to our surprise, she said, yes, that might be a possibility. And we were like, it's the kind of question we usually ask and just expect it. Nah, it's okay. I'm not interested. But yeah, to get a yes was quite like, okay, great.
Vicky just suggested that she could pick me up and that she could take me. And it took a month, just under a month, for me to get the courage and go, oh yeah, can you pick me up this week? It was an invitation that I took up. And it was actually during, I think it was the first song actually, Johnny played What a Beautiful Name It Is, because he's our worship leader. And it just took me back to losing my daughter at 17. When the midwife asked me what I was naming her, I said Riley, and she said, oh, what a beautiful name that is. And it just kind of was like, oh, wow. I feel really spoken to, and the day I first went to church was the 4-year anniversary of my daughter's passing, so it all just really fit well together. And then during the sermon, I just felt love. I can't explain it in any other way. I was listening to what Trevor was saying, I was reading the verse, and I felt love like I've never felt before. And I knew at that point that it was no longer me living for the world, but I wanted to live for Christ.
To see her come each week from that moment on, without fail, was just an incredible experience, because we suddenly saw that this shy and kind of reclusive young lady was suddenly turning outwards and coming out of the shell, and was meeting people, was chatting to people.
She now has a relationship with God, and she's part of the church, and she's just more happy and more confident. And she has, you know, she has faith now, so she has treasure in heaven, which is, you know, what we all need, really, more than being debt free.
that's the reason that we're doing the ministry in the first place. And so, it's like, I think it's like the disciples when Jesus told them to be fishers of men, that he'd send them out to do his work. And that's the opportunity that we get with CAP, is to go out every single week and to do that work, to seek and save the lost. And sometimes you throw out the net and you get some fish, and sometimes you don't. But it's knowing that it's in God's control. It's knowing that he's the one who is bringing the people along, that he wants to be saved in the right time, in the right place. And we just, with Rebecca, we were just the particular ones that had the opportunity to be there at that time when he called her.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's Daniel here. Hopefully you have just watched a testimony, a story of a CAP client at a centre in Loughborough that I saw at a recent CAP conference. And I wanted you to see it because I found it very moving. And also I thought that it really showed CAP at its best. And this is really summarised for me why I do CAP, why I am the centre manager for Addlestone and Chertsey. It's because I hope to have stories like this. And, I've met a lot of people while working for CAP over the last 3.5 years. I've met over 100 people who've needed help with their finances in our local area. And I've come across some amazing people. And I've also come across some very troubled people. And I've come across people who were like the client in the story. In fact, quite a few ladies who have very similar stories to tell. Stories of being left in a debt situation which they were totally unaware of by their ex-partners. Quite often they've got children as well involved, and they're behind with their rent and they're behind with their council tax. They had been told that these things were being paid for by their partners. They've had debts that were taken out in their name. They've had loans that have been taken out in their name by their partners that they were totally unaware of, and the money is all gone, and they have their name on those loans and on those debts, and they're being chased and harassed by enforcement agents through telephone calls, through letters coming through their postbox over and over and over again, final warnings, urgent settlement offers, and so on. And I think it's really important that we understand that actually there's a lot of people out there who are really just victims. The debt situation, people getting into financial trouble, is not always the person's fault. I mean, obviously sometimes it is. People have got themselves into a mess because they've been bad at managing money, or they've made assumptions about the future in terms of having a job that haven't turned out to be true, and they've based their spending on something that has turned out to be different in reality. And there's been people with addictions who've been unable to manage their budget because of their addiction issues. There's been so many, but the cases that really move me are ones like that client that you saw on the film, where they're just innocent victims of the situation. And it's just great. It's just great to be able to help people like that to get a fresh start. And it's great to see that this young lady more than just got a fresh start with her finances, but through CAP, she found a relationship with Jesus. And she was actually, there was a little bit more to the story that we saw at the conference that I haven't shown you, partly because the message was really for a thanks to CAP staff. But it goes on to explain that she's now enrolled at university and she's studying, and so it really has been a total fresh start for her. She's getting driving lessons and so on. There's lots and lots of things that are going on in her life as part of this church. And that she's in up in Loughborough, and that is amazing. And that's what I'm longing for, to see more of that in our local churches in Addlestone and Chertsey. And we've seen some through working with CAP and through the volunteers I have and meeting all these people. We've seen some amazing stories, but not yet many who've ended up in church. Some have crossed the doors of their church a few times since getting involved with CAP, but I'm not sure how many sort of sustainable long-term relationships with the local church have come out of CAP so far. But there have been a few where people have come a little bit closer to knowing Jesus. And the amazing thing is that almost everybody wants to pray and to be prayed for. It's almost universally something that people want, and that's been amazing too, because there's been some powerful things that have happened in that prayer time. People have really sensed God's love, they've really sensed the peace of God, they have sensed restoration in their bodies and in their minds, and that's been amazing. To be a part of that has been absolutely amazing. And I just wanted to sort of go on to say that during this difficult time, with coronavirus cases on the rise again, with winter approaching, with restrictions that are being introduced and probably, I would guess, new ones coming, that we have to reflect as Christians on, where are we in all of this? What can we do? And Richard has spoken over the last 2 weeks in particular about this, and it's got me thinking, because I think I'm quite lucky in a way, because I work for CAP, and when the work continues, it's over the phone now rather than face to face. But because I work for CAP, I have a chance to help people, to meet with them over the phone, to talk to them, to hear their stories, and to pray with them and to help them with their finances. But it's hard being trapped at home. And I think we have still got a role to play, and we have to believe those scriptures that talk about us, God having a plan for us that he has worked out in advance for us to do. And then there's another one that is at the end of the second letter that Paul writes to the Thessalonians about never growing tired of doing good. And, we have to work out what does that look like for us as individuals. And I know for some that it is outward looking, and that there are opportunities to serve through food bank, through other ways you can serve, perhaps through like working in the local cafe, or helping your neighbour, or taking food or medicines to people who are more vulnerable. But there's also making phone calls to people who are lonely that we know locally. So there are ways that we can look outwards, and for some, it is an outward-looking way that we can help at this time as Christians. But for others, our call perhaps is to look up. Perhaps for some it's both, but this is a chance to pray. This is a chance to study the Bible. This is a chance to get on our knees with God. And I'm just reminded of a chap called Rhys Howells. He was a Welsh guy during the Second World War, and he had a prayer going on in Wales, and he had a team of people with him, and they prayed for the war. They prayed for a lot of things, and they saw some amazing answers to prayer. And there's an incredible book called Intercessor that is by him that is really well worth reading if you get a chance and you're looking for something new to read that will inspire you. Then Rhys Howells, his book Intercessor, I'd highly recommend it. And for some of us, it is a time to wrestle with the situation, to pray for our government, to pray for our NHS, to pray for the people we know, to pray for well-being and health for those who are struggling, to pray for the world and for our local area and for our country. And so for many, that is a call that perhaps that you have, that God has put on your heart. But let us hear the call, whatever it is that God has put on our hearts to do at this time, let us do it. For some, it may be to worship God in the privacy of our homes. For some, it may be there's an opportunity to teach through online maybe putting together some podcasts, maybe writing some poetry that's going to inspire people. Maybe it's about writing blogs that people might be blessed by. There's lots of things, but God has something for you. So pray and ask him. Get a piece of paper and start to write down what comes to mind and what's on your heart and what's on your thoughts. But there is something that God has planned in advance for you during this time. So let us not look inwards. Let us look up and let us look out according to God's call on your life. In Jesus' name, amen.